Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today we have a bonus edition and the man behind the lady is joining me. So a lot of you would have heard me reference Matt quite a lot on the podcast and how he's helped me as a bodybuilder and, of course, to find happiness in life. And I just felt that one day we would probably need to get you on the podcast, of course, Matt. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
And although this isn't your first podcast, it's still what we're going to talk about today is a pretty, I guess it's an emotional tie for a lot of people and a lot of the listeners. We're going to be launching into a female empowerment series from next Monday. And I think that sometimes people forget that men still have hang-ups, still have things that they struggle with on this journey as a bodybuilder. Now, you've been bodybuilding for many years, even just before me as well. So it comes with certain thoughts and feelings. Of course, we're always striving for more. And we both agree that we're like, God, sometimes we need a break from this mentally, because it's always like you achieve a milestone and then there's something else coming up. So I think that generally recently we've had a little bit more from the male guests talking about scale weight, body image, this type of thing. So we're going to talk about your journey today. Now, this is something, like I say, that's very deep rooted for many of us. And I have to be, showing that gratefulness that you've actually come on to talk about this, because this is an internal talk for you, but then we talk about this all the time, but then it's just us. So for this to go live on the podcast is obviously like, whoa, this is quite a subject. So I would imagine the best place to begin would be why you got into the gym and bodybuilding in the first place. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Like when I initially went into the thought process of training, I guess it started before even then, where as a child, I was kind of renowned for being skinny. Like me and my granddad had a great relationship, but he'd refer to me as Gandhi because I was so skinny, not because of my Indian descent. So this was something that I considered to be, it was quite a thing to be almost celebrated. And it was just something that was, I wasn't really someone who was big into food. It wasn't really a focal point for me. If I had meals like lunches and things that I would have made, sometimes I would eat them, some things I wouldn't. It just wasn't really it wasn't a food focused thing. Now looking back on it, it was just food didn't really interest me that much. From that perspective, this then became a negative when I found myself to be one of the smaller people at school, and I then moved from Devon, where I'd lived for most of my childhood, into the last year of kind of primary school, and that upheaval then separated me from not knowing anyone and then going into high school, and then I didn't really know where my place was to fit in there. Then from there, I kind of, as I became a teenager and evolved into that, I would wear baggier clothes. I would cover up more. Like it was the whole, it wasn't emo, but it was like skater kind of look. And I thought that it was back then because that's how I wanted to dress. But in reality, it was more to cover up and more, maybe add size or an illusion, the fact that I wasn't as small as I was. And then I got into running, believe it or not. And I did like cross country running, but because I wasn't affiliated with anyone at school, I would run with the teacher or the person who was there, who was like the pace setter, and I wanted to keep pace with them, and I felt like I was dying every single time, but I had to keep up. So that was my first taste of maybe that progression and that I could achieve something. So that would be kind of where almost the start of my lack of belief or consciousness around those things. And then my dad had like weights and things at home, things that I'd never really sort of looked into. In my eyes, he had sort of like a decent physique. He had like veins in his biceps and things like that. And I remember getting into sort of lifting a little bit, like I do press ups and sit ups. And there became this kind of challenge where it was like, oh, I wonder if I can get a 6-pack. And then I started doing like 20 sit-ups a day, 20 push-ups a day, which were broken down because I couldn't do any sit-ups or press-ups really without like being flabbergasted on the floor. And then it was like, I'll do 60, 80, 100. And then it got up to like sets of 300 where I'd do 300 of each. And then I'd start doing handstand press-ups where I'd flip myself up against the airing cupboard door and then lower myself down and back up again. And that was really the first time that I'd started to train, if we were to call it anything. And I started to see changes within my body, but I was still very, very small. I didn't know anything about food. I still didn't eat really anything that much substantial. Again, it wasn't a food focused thing. It was just it wasn't an interest. And I thought if I trained, I would gain muscle. And yeah, that's kind of how I got started into it, really.
Actually, what you just finished on there about thinking that if you train, you'll gain muscle, definitely similar to me when I started bodybuilding. I thought, oh, those people on stage, they just, do a bit of nutrition and do a bit at the gym. And then, of course, when you get into this realm, even for yourself, you haven't competed, but when you did your photo shoot, you did posing lessons and the things that, go alongside being a competitor. So you start to understand that there's so much more than just the training and even then the nutrition. How did you find when you started to try and actually gain muscle? Was there some tuition there around food when you started embarking on being a bodybuilder?
Yeah, so I avoided going into the gym for quite a long time because I was just so self-conscious of being so small, and everyone in the gym knows exactly what they're doing, and these hulking people that walk around, because I'd got like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and I envisaged that that's where everyone was within their physique based things. And owing to my negative experience with school and people, wasn't something that I wanted to surround myself with. So then when I did eventually go to the gym, it was about 2 years, 2.5 years of kind of training at home and doing things there. And then people were like, oh, you're in really good condition. Like, as in, I was very small, but I had muscle separation and like all of the things that you would look aesthetically now at a physique and go, oh, okay, like you train. You're not big, but you train. And then one of the ladies from the gym, her father was like a previous Mr. Britain, and she took me to where his gym was, and they did like all the CMP affiliation and things. And he wrote me my first kind of meal plan, which was the typical chicken, rice, broccoli, eat this food. And that was the first time that anyone had kind of, besides, I spoke to a guy at the gym called Andy, and he was like the biggest guy there, which is typically who you go and speak to, right? And he was scary as anything in terms of like looking at from a like, I am probably your calf muscle, and that's it. And he was like an ex-para, and he was one of the soundest people I've ever spoken to in the gym. And he gave me some advice on lifting, and then pointed me in the direction of Kate, who then took me to see her dad. And we had a conversation about if I wanted to go down the route of bodybuilding, and we'd spoken about steroids, and we spoke about what it would take. And at that point, I just started to get tattoos. And it was a conversation about, if you get tattoos, it's going to scupper your chances of bodybuilding because it's not kind of like it is now. And for me, that was it's kind of a synergistic thing that runs alongside bodybuilding for me, is covering my body in artwork has helped me build a better relationship with myself. It's hard to define exactly how that runs. Many people who have tattoos will potentially know how that feels. And for me, at that point, I was doing it because I enjoyed it. I was doing it because I saw a one-to-one paradigm of the effort that I put in for the result that I get out. I don't need to depend on anyone else, which means it doesn't matter. If no one likes me, I'm not popular, it doesn't matter, because I can go to the gym for 3 hours and then I can come back, and then 6 weeks later I've noticed a new bicep, or something that's popped up somewhere. So when that conversation came up, the steroids thing was a weird thing, because I was like, well, I don't really know whether that's something that I want to explore. Seems like I'm still quite new into it, and it didn't really interest me at that point. And then the tattoo thing just killed it, because I was like, nah, I'm not going to compete because I want to cover myself in ink. And that to me is more important to me at this point. And then when he gave me the nutrition plan, I just followed it. I just went home, went and bought the stuff, it was the most food that I'd have ever eaten. but then I started to grow. And then I saw the merit in that when I had enough money, I went and got the supplements, which is like your omega-3s and, you know, vitamin C's and things like that. And I saw progress. So then I started to see, okay, well, I need to eat more to train more. And then I kind of ran that a little bit too much, and I ended up training 7 days a week for 3 hours a day. And that was after I'd done like all of my work that I needed to do, done college, like the additional A-level stuff that I went back in to do off the back of that, because I kind of left college, then drifted back into education again after that.
Mm.
And then that was the first kind of diet aspect that went in, which kind of led me down the path of just eating more and more.
Yeah, for sure. And all of this contributes to a bit of a background into what actually led to us really recording this episode, where there was that time when I spoke about this on the pod in my own personal journey of my relationship with food, and how I had this epiphany on the plane when we went on holiday, and how you supported me through that. And actually it was dealing with something that was deep rooted that I didn't really, I guess, give the understanding that it was that bad. And that was hard for me. And this is, you know, it's been hard for you to talk about this when we've had our talks, and you had almost 2 or 3 weeks later, or however long it was, this similar epiphany moment with how much body image has affected you from those younger years. And you mentioned your dad earlier, and sort of aspiring to seeing veins and things like that, and him having kit, and how that impacted you as a child when you wanted to get bigger because he would call you small as well. So then it led to this, almost, we call it an epiphany, as to how all of those things, so being at school and being skinny, and then potentially a relationship with your dad, and then trying to find your place in the gym, and then maybe using aggression in the gym. And then it was like, this is all stemming from, okay, I've always felt like a small person. And I guess we could talk about like how that felt when you maybe realized how much it was affecting you, and when you used to train with so much aggression, that's not there as much anymore. We train together, you know, we enjoy training, and how that felt to offload that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously when you start training, there's that saying that's like the first day that you start training is the day that you're forever small, right? And I think it changes person to person, so I don't want to blanket statement it, but when you start off, like that's your baseline, and then, well, when you wake up, that's your baseline. You know, you could wake up 5 years later, and if you've progressed and done everything, well, that's day zero again.
Mm.
And then you are in that skin until you see the changes and progression. It's not until you look back. But this whole sport is about progression, and in terms of bodybuilding, it's also about comparison. You're being compared to other people, even though you should compare to yourself. And then that can, you know, whether you're fitting criteria or whether you're fitting life standards. I know as a man, like looking at the pictures on like boxer shorts and stuff like that, they're decked out with a 6-pack. I mean, they don't train legs, but they've got a big chest. So that's something that, again, is another standard. And I lost that for a good period of time, where I got into the gym. I enjoyed the progression. I enjoyed that side of things. What enabled me to train so hard for so long is I fueled the hate that riddled me every single day. The people who called me names, the people who gave me shit, the people who, you know, were violent towards me. Those people in the gym like fueled every single heavy set that went in, and I could just go in somewhere, put my hood up, go and do what I needed to do, and then leave thinking that I felt better. But ultimately I was just masking this or using it as that. And being happy within yourself is hard if you just go off an aesthetic and just go off progression sometimes, because you can then not necessarily process, and this is what I didn't do, process how I was thinking and feeling. I just went on, have I beat my logbook? Have I eaten my food? Have I done everything that I needed to do? And I went from sort of 9 stone, and then to my heaviest, I've been over 18 stone. And I would say that during that time, whilst obviously I occupy more space, there are times when I have conversations with people, like when Lewis came and stayed,
Mm.
he's probably close to maybe a stone over what I started at. But when I have a conversation, I don't feel any different when I'm wearing a t-shirt, which I know might sound odd to people, but that's how I feel. And I will see a bodybuilder, I will see someone that I maybe look up to and be like, I could never be like that. That is so far away. And I find it really hard to call myself a bodybuilder, even though I do the habits that a bodybuilder would do. And I've done them year in, year out, week in, week out for multiple different, years, and come back from injury, illness to do and repeat the same things. But that's my perception of a bodybuilder, and that's something that I've put in my own mind, and that's a set of visuals or aesthetic or whatever it might be. And when we had this epiphany, it was like I was still comparing myself to that point, and I didn't readily realize the detriment that that was doing, and weighing on letting myself enjoy the process and not worry about, am I that much bigger? Am I doing this? Am I going to look like that person? And something that you said was, well, if you looked back from when you started, what would you think of how you look now? And it's like, there's a picture of me, because I never used to have pictures because I just hide away in the corner. I just, not notably, like I can't remember actually hiding away in the corner, but I would just be very small. And when I now know body language and I know working with people, when I see that, I recognize it. And there's this one picture where I'm hid away in a corner in a big hoodie, like crowded over. And I think if that person looked at me now, he'd be like, that's sick.
Yeah.
But that's a big thing to say, because, and this is something that I talk about with clients, is giving yourself credit for what you've done without thinking that you're being big headed, because you're striving for something that is, for many people, unattainable, because they can't understand what food is. They can't understand that you must move your body to feel better and do all of these things. So having that epiphany, it was really quite upsetting to feel the sadness that I still felt, that I didn't recognize and realize, and that potentially that had bled into everything. And since we've met, obviously I've experienced true happiness. So therefore, when we've been into the gym, there isn't a rage there isn't anything negative. And to train without that is a very odd feeling, because then it's like, well, what is this? Because I've never really been able to train any other way, because I've only known pain, discomfort, hurt, upset, escape. The gym has been everything for me, from a bad day to a great day. And I'm lucky in that respect, because I know other people that have experienced similar things and they've shut themselves away. Some of those people aren't even here anymore from when I used to go to school. And that was something that I found very, very sad. And I feel very lucky to have found the thing that I did within physique development. But with being with yourself and the help that you've given me has allowed me to look deeper past the aesthetic and that side of things. And that's challenged me, but in a very positive way. So I think that was a roundabout way of answering that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it, like I say, in reference to what happened to me. It's dealing with those things. For both of us, they came out very organically, because of course, through our relationship, we've built that trust, and we just come out with stuff and it's like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And for these two circumstances, they were big things that we've both been holding on. And we spoke about the body image thing in regards to me when I came away from prep, and you were empowering me. And then I didn't really realize, like I say to you, don't I? You used to make, like, I guess, comments about yourself, and I'd be like, don't talk about yourself like that. And that was, we believe, stemming from this whole thing of, your whole life fighting for more, striving for more. And you'd say something that was like very ad hoc, I'm a hobby builder, or I'm not a proper bodybuilder, or this type of stuff. And I'd be like, this is almost upsetting, because I know that you pour, if not more, into bodybuilding than competitors I've met, because we both take it very seriously in a diet phase, in an off season, whatever that is. And then of course these like comments almost felt like you were being self-detrimental, and I'm sure you'd agree, when we reflect, they were signs of you being self-detrimental, but you not realizing it was as detrimental as it was when it all came out?
Yeah, I think talking about it as well, it's almost that same behavior of if you say it yourself, no one else can then say it. So the perception of the outside, and this is something that, from putting myself on social media over time, which is, a part of what I do, but not necessarily a comfortable part, is putting yourself out there, and maybe not competing is part of something that builds into that. But certainly the aesthetic and the way that I look upon my own physique, or certainly looked upon my own physique, I can definitely take a more objective perspective now, and also refer back to that. Well, how would I feel a year ago? How would I feel 5 years ago? How would I certainly feel when I started? And then also, like, have I progressed? And to me now, progression isn't necessarily, have I added 5 pounds of muscle over the course of, well, ideally a month, but in terms of reality, have I PB'd in terms of my mental fortitude, my understanding, and now really working even deeper upon myself? And those comments were absolutely self-detrimental, and not intentionally,
Mm.
but more so from, it's hard to say where it kind of came from, but I believe that more than likely it was just to pass off comments that I believed other people may make or say, and then I've already kind of said it out loud. And also the standard that I did hold myself to, because we can look at the genetically elite people, we can look at people that push more drugs, we can look at people that have done it for 25 years instead of 10 to 12 years, and be like, I should be like that, whereas actually I should be better than I was before. And this is where I think now, having these revelations, it's caused me to dig deeper within my psyche and within my relationship to myself. So when I kind of have an achievement or whatever it might be, it's to celebrate it and eliminate the negative self-talk, but not by negating it or ignoring it, but rather by acknowledging it and going, I need to call myself out on that, and why am I saying that? And then, can I just change it by saying, instead of going, I'm a hobby builder, saying, I enjoy bodybuilding, and it's just a really fun aspect for me where I actually really enjoy training, and it's managed to yield me this great amount of progress over time. And I'm not where I want to be, but I'm closer than I would be if I didn't do it. And then it's like, well, okay, starting to steadily turn the tide back in favor of just being positive.
And when we talk about that in relation to when we are always striving for more, it ties heavily into every phase. It's like you're looking for the next phase, you're looking for the next phase, and perhaps not living in that present moment of enjoying the phase you're in, because we've had so many conversations where you're in an off-season phase and you just can't wait to diet because it becomes uncomfortable. Then you do a diet and you're like, well, I wonder what I'm going to look like when I push back up. And it's like this constant wheel of, if you're not then enjoying that, then you're going to get to a certain point and look back and think, fucking hell, I didn't enjoy any of that. I can't even remember half of it because I was just putting in the work and not maybe recognizing how much I was doing to improve myself. And you mentioned mental fortitude, what you can get from this sport, or whether you compete or whether you don't compete. Bodybuilding is available to many people. It offers that discipline, it offers structure, and so much more control over your aesthetic. But maybe we could talk about, before this mini cut that you're 4 weeks in, how that got uncomfortable in regards to your own body image at the height of off season, because I think that's very interesting for people that are in off season, but also females that listen to the pod, if their other half is doing what you're doing, how that might feel from a male point of view when you do push up past that comfort level that we do.
Yeah, for sure. So pushing up for me, owing to, if we flip back to not eating much food, that then led me into eating more food, and then I saw the progress, and then that drove me to be able to eat more and more food. So I escalated my body weight as a natural, way beyond, like, without the muscle that Lee Priest has, Lee Priest levels of body composition almost.
Are we saying fluffy?
Oh, like, I was like the fluffiest bunny you could ever have seen. And
Oh.
I know, super cute. So I embraced eating, and as a byproduct of that, whether that changed something fundamentally or whether I just realized that I actually do enjoy food and never really gave myself the opportunity to have it. Pushing up from an appetite perspective has not been an issue, whereas in body composition side of things, it has been an issue from the perspective of feeling uncomfortable within myself. So when I started my initial photo shoot prep, I took a side shot on my physique comparisons, my physique update. And when I saw that side shot, I went, nope, that's it. I need to diet. Like, I saw my midsection and I was trying to pull it in and nothing was happening. And I was like, I train abs at this point, so this should be able to be pulled in. But it wasn't being able to pulled in. So that led into that diet phase. And then that led into the photo shoot to get the leanest that I've ever got with the most amount of muscle that I've ever had as a natural. And then pushing up. Overall, I've kind of pushed up over 80 pounds. It's over 100 pounds, but it was like up sort of 37, up 42, down 37, up 50 something. And so therefore over that time I've really pushed and pushed and pushed. And this time that side shot image was in my mind, that I need to harness that point and push through it, because the photo shoot before was natural and this is enhanced, which means now I've unlocked the ability to do an enhanced fat loss phase. And the first enhanced fat loss phase that I went through, bearing in mind that my first photo shoot prep took 54 pounds off and it took 6 months, the first mini cut was 37 pounds off in 6 weeks. So fairly big difference. So I knew that it was possible to kind of push up past that point, but I really had to stay in tune with how I was feeling. The hardest part for me overall was the sleep impact off the back of this, combined with then by the end of the day, just before we started this mini cut, after I'd eaten all the food that I needed to eat, my physique looked completely different. And my midsection, there was no way it was getting pulled in. I drink like 5.5 to 6 liters of fluid a day. So that, on top of all the food, on top of taking insulin, which is like just promoting some additional water retention off the back of that anyway, or fluidy kind of look to the physique, that was probably 15 pounds extra that I pushed up, as in from the point that I found psychologically difficult, maybe 20 pounds to that point, 15 to 20 pounds of just accepting that that's where it was going to be. And then for me to make the decision to go into the mini cut was, I felt uncomfortable, but from a sleep perspective, the sleep was really bad. You know yourself that like my sleep, it was kind of apnea style. I was waking myself up. I was getting acid reflux. I was waking myself up in the night, and my breathing through the day, whilst it didn't impact anything that I was actually doing, like I could hear myself breathing at rest. So just while I was kind of sat watching the TV or going through some kind of check-ins, etc., I could hear kind of my breathing just getting worse and worse and worse. So then to kind of launch into the most optimal phase, it was kind of point through there. You helped me massively with my body composition, because I don't think that I would have pushed up as much, because it would have left me feeling more unconfident or uncomfortable from that perspective. So that definitely helped as well. So yeah.
I think there is merit in saying that you were willing to be almost transparent and vulnerable during that space, and you allowed me to support you. Whereas I think that sometimes this isn't just men, this is women as well. You know, we both have similar traits, but you think, oh, you know, I won't lean on anyone around me. I'm choosing to push up or diet or whatever it is, whatever discomfort you're feeling in your body, whether that's getting shredded or whether that's pushing up, either end of the spectrum, you become quite isolated and think, well, the choice is mine. I've just got to sit with being uncomfortable. So our morning walks, of course, are our time where we reflect on a lot of things. And then you letting me in and trusting me to do that then facilitates, of course, you being able to say maybe how you feel. And that, I think, is a message to the listeners. If you're in a partnership and one of you or both of you are pushing to extremes, the communication is massive. Like, you know, when we're working with clients, we talk about this a lot, talking to your other half. And I understand, because we've both been there. We've both been in relationships, right, where it's not worth the conversation because they either don't understand, or maybe they give information and you push it back because you're not in the right relationship. So that may be apparent for people that are listening, not really being able to open up to their partner or people around them. But we could maybe delve into how you talk about this with clients, because I know that you work on a lot of mindset with your male clients. That's actually increased of late, hasn't it? And potentially due to this, your self growth, you're able to offer more to your clients. And I know that you're really getting into that side of things. And I've overheard, conversations you have with clients about dealing with this and how they can open up to people around them or open up to you. Maybe we could touch on that for some context.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of my stronger suits in terms of coaching is that I've pushed to both levels of kind of extremities, to dieting down, to pushing up, and struggled with my own self-confidence and self-worth, for want of a better word, over time. And luckily, like I say, I found bodybuilding, or lifting, as I kind of knew it when I initially got in, like doing push-ups and sit-ups probably makes Arnie turn over. Just the thought of that. But I was lucky to have that area. And something that people will get pushed into is maybe people will go hard into work, maybe people will go hard into, whether it is, a hobby that they've got that then just becomes their life, or maybe it is food, maybe it is something else. We all are just shaped by the things and sort of feelings that we have, and the things that we end up doing, and the environments that we cast ourselves in. So when embarking on a journey with a client, it's definitely more around that mindset. And something that we speak about is having a big why, and really understanding why you want to achieve something. But when we're looking at the limitations of why people haven't achieved something in the past, is it because they haven't had the right nutrition knowledge? Is it because they didn't have the right 5-day training split? Or is it because they don't truly believe that they're going to achieve it, because they say a goal, but they say, I want to lose 2 stone, I want to put on some muscle. Okay, well, do you believe that you can actually do that? And how many attempts have you had in the past? And if you are allowing those attempts to then bleed into scuppering your attempt that you're about to embark on, then it's a changing and adjusting that, or really addressing it to start off with, and really looking at how you do talk to yourself. Like, are you someone who says, what are you doing that for? Why are you even bothering? If you're doing that 45 times a day, but you're only saying, right, today's the day I'm going to the gym, well, that's 45 to 1 paradigm. Like, that's not favorable odds to anyone. So then we start to change the tide. And whether it's gratitude, which I found very useful for some clients, or whether it's mindfulness, or whether it's just noting how you do talk about yourself. And a good analogy is, in the way that you kind of said to me, like, how would you view yourself in the past? It's like, how would you talk to a friend? If you wrote down the scenario or the situation that you're in, and your friend was in that scenario situation, what advice would you give? And we can often find more negatives and more sort of mishaps that are going to happen than we can solutions, and we can very quickly snowball. But for someone else, we could find any number of solutions for that. So starting to change that thought process around this and go, well, actually, if I just change my self-talk, and this is something that I've definitely done, where I'm like, hey, you're not a bodybuilder, you're okay, well, that's something that then I need to address. So then it's like, well, no, I am a bodybuilder because I do all the things that bodybuilders do. Like, am I a competitive bodybuilder, like who's stepping on stage? No, but that's not what I'm kind of alluding to. It's like, I don't have those things, whereas I do. So it's addressing those things. And then a big thing is auditing the circle of people that we have around us. So as you said, previous relationships, and certainly one of the biggest things that we have is that communication. And this is something that I learned whilst I was away traveling, was communication style, and understanding that people communicate in one way and people receive information in another. So you can express something, someone else can completely misunderstand what that is, and it's not in the tonality or anything of that nature. It's just how they receive information. They might not receive it or want to receive it like you do. So then it's your ability to understand and express. And you can only ever do this if you take the time to understand the person that you're with, and you have to want to do that, right? So that has to be a part of it. And something that we had was just that instant special connection that was hard to describe or define. And then as we got closer and closer, it's just evolved and evolved, and we talk about anything and everything. And having that free flow is hard to define with words how really spectacular that is as a feeling, because we just walk and talk and everything comes out, and even things that we don't know. And we said that we wish that everyone could have this because it's such a special feeling. And I think when you are two separate people, it's understanding that you are two separate people, you're shaped by different things and things of that nature. So then that leads into the circle of the people that I have as clients, is like, well, who's your nearest and dearest? Are they in on how you truly feel? Because I get to speak with clients about things that, you know, I've had so many clients that cry to me, and nothing ever goes any further. There's nothing that we're going to discuss here, but it's something that I say, well, does your girlfriend know? Does your husband know? Does your wife know? No, I've never spoken to them about it. Okay, well, do you think that there's a way that you could potentially start to bring those things in? Not that you have to go and completely do that, but a stepping stone. And sometimes this can separate friendships, and this can make you realize that people aren't actually there for you, unfortunately. But then, you know, like the community that we are building with the people that we attract, they start to see that they're not alone. And when they start to go to the gym, or they go swimming, or they do whatever it is that they want to do that takes them forward, they start to build a new community or a new group of friends. And those new group of friends solidifies them believing in themselves, them and their self-talk and all of those things. So there's a multifaceted approach, and it's just really nice to be able to help people deal with those things that I think we can be so focused on. It's training, it's nutrition, it's do the plan. It's like, well, understand the person and understand the feelings, and then you'll probably unlock the ability to follow the plan and follow the nutrition and go and do the steps, because it's headspace, because it's peace, because it's quiet, because it's time to process your thoughts, where you're not at work and you're not at home and you haven't got 5 million pets running around or whatever it might be.
And would you say, in relation to that, that when you've worked with clients or for yourself, you know, when you start to maybe understand yourself more beyond what your why is through physique development, but actually understanding who you are, what you like, what you enjoy, all of those things opens up a new level of communication?
Yeah, for sure. I think we, as there was a video that I saw, and it was really great. It was, who are you? And the guy was like, I'm Joe. And he was like, no, Joe's the name that you were given, but who are you? Like, we all introduce ourselves as our name, or people, you know you as what you've achieved or what you've done or what your job title is. That's not who you are. Who are you? And delving deeper into who that is, like, what do you like? What are your feelings? What are your true feelings? What are the things that make you do the things that you do every single day? What is the environment that you grew up in? How did that shape you into the person that you are now? Are the things that you carry from that point into what you're doing now? Those are the things that define, like, where you find yourself, not who you are, because you can change that. And I think that's something that I had to accept over time. I'm not the skinny kid that I used to be. Now I'm tattooed and 9 stone heavier than I was before. And I have a whole lot of life experience to boot with that. Some good, some bad, but all has delivered me to this point to be able to be where I am. And I won't be where I am in 5 or 10 years. And that's absolutely fine, because that means that I can grow from that point. So I think understanding who you actually are, and this is where delving into it with clients, and you know, for myself, I like this kind of idea of becoming your superhero self. So then it's like, well, what are the attributes? What are the characteristics of that superhero? What do they do? How do they feel? How do they think? How do they treat people around them? And maybe more importantly, how do they treat themselves? And then embodying that. And that's something that's worked quite well as both a visual and just something that we can kind of talk about. And it's something that I think about fairly frequently and kind of audit now, you know, through our talks and kind of self-actualizations and things of that nature. And it's both an enlightening experience between clients, because sometimes I'll speak through something with a client and then relate it back and think, oh, I need to kind of maybe readjust that, and maybe this is some advice that I can take from myself. Or sometimes a client will find something that we've talked about something, they've gone off and done something a little bit different, and they're like, oh, I tried this and this really worked, and I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. So yeah, I think it's a giving process both ways, and it's yeah.
You actually shared something that you read. I mean, this is highlighting how much Matt's on social media. I mean, I can't get him off the reels, but we move. We move. When you spoke earlier about, I think it was something you'd seen a video or something along those lines about a guy that said, if I was going to give you a car, it's a similar scenario to what you were just talking about there. Tell the listeners, come on, this was a good one on our morning walk today.
Yeah, so besides the silverback gorilla reels, there are some insightful reels that I do like to watch. And there was this video that I watched years and years and years ago, and I could never find it, and then it just popped up randomly. And arguably, after these epiphanies have happened, so the
Yep.
universe delivering.
The universe.
So this guy says, and he's like a billionaire, so it's completely plausible that he can do this for you. He says, want you to pick the perfect car. Imagine the car that you want, the dream car. It's got the interior that you want, it's the engine you want, the complete spec, and I'll buy it for you. He goes, there's only one condition. You only get one, and it has to last you a lifetime. How would you treat that car? And the answer is, you treat it immaculately. You would service it, you would look after it to the nines, because you know you're only ever going to get one, and it's your dream car. Well, that's your body, that's your mind, that's you. You only get one. So how are you looking after yourself? And I found this so powerful when I started to think about it. And it was one of the catalysts watching that video originally that led me down the idea of downloading Audible, starting to listen to psychology, starting to listen and try and understand and unpack some of my thoughts and feelings. And I really love the way it's kind of brought across. And I'm not a big petrol head or a big car enthusiast, but I like the analogy.
Yeah, it's really cool, isn't it? Because things like that, sometimes you just scroll through and you come across something, you're like, oh, that really resonates. And we use this type of thing when we talk to each other about examples, and it, I guess, opens your mind in a different way, and then you can have a conversation. And we spoke about communicating with those around you. And I think when you embark on this journey, so like if someone listens to this and they go, oh, okay, so I'm going to treat myself like this amazing car, that path then leads you into a phase of self-growth and personal development. And then along that way, something I speak about on the pod a lot, we talk about it as well, is potentially then what other people see that as. So what that guy was saying with the car, you treating yourself like that, a lot of people in society will view that as selfish. Now that then ties into bodybuilding, competing, what goes into that, and it's labeled a selfish sport. Now, I think probably the best way I would sort of unpick that, I guess, is that I say, yeah, it can be selfish to the degree that you need to put yourself first in certain phases of this journey. But if you can't pour time into yourself, then you're just, you're pouring from an empty cup. You're helping everyone around you. And part of that journey is something that we both resonate with and speak to clients about, as to what you can get from that. But then, of course, those external pressures I mentioned, of people going, well, you're being really selfish now. You're not coming out for food. You don't drink anymore. Whatever these things may be, I think external pressures could be something that we could talk about from maybe a male and a female point of view, of how we both deal with that or have dealt with that. Of course, we have each other now, so we're in our own bubble half the time. But external pressure wise, I know that sometimes you say, like, I can be a bit more empathetic in these types of scenarios, but I think this is going to probably resonate with male and female. Like, men can sometimes maybe find it a bit easier to be like, I'm doing my gym, etc. Fucking do one. Whereas girls might go, oh, I'm going to gym, I could meet you as well. Like, this type of behavior. Do you think that would be something to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. There's varying different social pressures, I think, when you embark on this. I think if we just touch on the relationship side, obviously when you were in prep, and we just kind of started our relationship. I think there has to be an understanding of what the goal is and what your other half is going through during that time. And we'd only just started our relationship, but I was fully aware that prep was going to be prep. And for me, it was, well, that's your destination, that's where you're going, and then anything to facilitate that, to make it not the easiest like ride, because you can't make it any easier, but we get to walk every day, make sure that we eat our meals at the same time, have a bedtime, have a wake time. Like, what do you need to do that? I just want to spend time with you. That's all that matters. I don't care what you eat or you don't eat. I don't, obviously, if you've got to do hours and hours of cardio, it's like, I'd like to hang out with you at that time. But, it's just, I can be in the same space. I can go and do my steps while you're doing your cardio. And then if we've got extra steps to do, I mean, I just get to walk with you. So it's fine. Like, it's enjoyable and we get to be there. And, our trips to posing were adventures that we could go to together in the car. And I think it's just the way you perceive it. Because if you perceive that you have to go out for pizza 3 times a week with your other half, and that's the only way you're having fun, maybe you should find other things and other ways that you can have fun or just spend time together. Because, and this is my own opinion, I just want to spend time with you. I don't care where we are. I don't care what we're doing. That's the main thing. We'll make memories, whatever we're doing, regardless. When it comes to friends and those around us, you've got work, you've got the work situation, which is obviously if you start changing and you don't go with the office mentality of, why aren't you having a cake? Why aren't you doing this? But everyone's a serial dieter. It's a case of, and these are the kind of stages that I run through. I'll explain it to people. Oh, then if they persist, then I'll say, this is what makes me truly happy. And then if they persist past that point, I'll say, this is what makes me happy. And you're telling me not to do something that makes me happy. So does that mean you don't want me to be happy? And then past that point, I'll say, are you still under the diet? How many diets is this have you done? And then I'll just perpetually go after them in that way, because that's my mentality. If you're going to come after me for wanting to be healthier, fitter, stronger, whatever, and I've worked in multiple workplaces and it's always been the same, we're on a diet this week and then it gets to Friday and everyone's on chippy and then everyone gets smashed at the weekend. So those are the multiple kind of ways that I'll approach that side of things. And then I've been out watching football with people, going for beers, and it's been, you're not having a drink, no, I'll just drink this. And there are people who will cave under this peer pressure mentality from doing that. And that's something that you have to address yourself, because what you have to think is you are, as we've said, a byproduct of your environment, the things that have happened to you over time, and you've been shaped and molded by these things. If you decide that you're going to have a life change or a life shift, and we obviously work with lifestyle clients who might want to go out for a couple of drinks. If you are making some kind of shift, you can't have 10 drinks. You might have to have 5, or you might have to have 3. That's fine. If you're going to be in a photo shoot prep, or you're going to be in, a prep for stage, and you're in, the final part, or the part where it needs to be all meticulous because you want to bring your best, then there's going to be a cutoff for that point. And then you need to ascertain, are these people actually the people who are going to be serving you for what you're looking to do? And you should have run through those kind of stages with that. Well, I'm just doing this now because this is what makes me happy. If they don't want to see you happy, or they don't want to support you, that begs more of a question of them. And you said it perfectly in terms of being selfish, is like, is it selfish to look after yourself? Is it selfish to invest in yourself? Or is it more selfish from someone else's perspective to want you to do what they are doing? In my mind, that's the selfish aspect, because if you can be present and go out with people, and you can either take your food with you, or you can make changes and adjustments or recommendations at the restaurant that accommodate for you. I don't want to hang around with someone who thinks that they're only going to hang around with Matt because he eats 5 burgers. But what happens if I'm dieting? Well, that's not, so I'm only worthy of your company if we eat the same food. And I'm not here to facilitate other people's eating habits. I don't care if someone wants to eat 5 pizzas and 16 burgers in front of me. If I need to eat what I need to eat, we're going to have a great time, because we're going to talk, we're going to do everything that we want to talk about and do, and you can enjoy your food and I'll enjoy mine. It doesn't change the experience. If I say you've got to come to my house and you've got to sit and eat chicken and rice with me, I'm I'm impacting that on you, then that's selfish of me. But if I can match up and match in with that, that's in my mind how it should be. And just again, that communication front, just be open and honest and say how you feel. And then you can really sit back, and someone's reaction to that will tell you a lot about that person. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe in time they'll come over. But my thought process on this, I just cut people off now because it's not worth my time, because my happiness is more important than that. And the people who really matter will be there when all the dust settles. And the people who won't, I won't miss them anyway.
Yeah, well, it does bleed into the external pressures of relating right back to what the podcast is about today from the foundational point of view of body image. I think that sometimes when you embark on this journey, you do get that pushback, I guess is probably the best word, of what you've just touched on there. You take control, and yeah, it's labeled selfish or whatever we want to call it, because people maybe aren't in a position to do it themselves, which is what you're sort of describing there. And then that facilitates external comments or pressures because they see you doing well and they want to do well, and then, like you say, sometimes it can turn around and then people get on board. But it's tough when, especially like, in a diet, and for you being a male, and when you did this naturally and got peeled, like, people I'd imagine were potentially saying things around that period as well. So you've got like the off season, and then what you had going back to that sort of skinny person, I guess, from an outsider's point of view.
Yeah, for sure. Like the biggest thing when you diet I say as a natural, but it can happen anytime.
Yeah.
If you end up losing 20, 30 pounds, people are like, you still lift? You still go to the gym? And you're like, yep, still going. It's been 10 years, still going. So it does have the capacity to impact you. It used to be more of a thing when I was PTing and I would go through a diet phase, and you would just like shrink in your shirts and people would tap you on the back. Oh, you're still training? You're looking a bit thin. And people just don't know the terminology. And this would then cause that kind of hammering in of body image even more. And it kind of went right back to then my granddad saying what he said, which used to be a massive bonus, which still is a fond memory because it was just funny and hilarious at the time. But then it was down that rabbit hole of, well, should I be doing this? Do I need to push up more? And as a natural, speaking from someone who's now enhanced and kind of went down that route of doing it from that photo shoot, so from that very lean stage, it's a night and day difference. Obviously, your experience is going to be different based upon your individual response and point of starting. But the difference is night and day from being able to retain mass, also retain fullness, retain strength, and do things that are wildly just unavailable. And as a natural, we know that it takes so long, especially if you've got some muscle or you've accrued quite a bit of muscle over a period of time. If you're not a genetically elite individual, it takes a long time to amass that, and a long time being very consistent at amassing that, to then only lose some of that or quite a bit of that over the course of dieting. And, when you do pull down, you lose full food volume and fullness very, very quickly. To then have comments like that, and also from those people around you. So it's like, oh, you're dieting now, or you're eating more now, so you're not doing that diet thing anymore. And it's like, well, I'm still following a diet, but I'm following a diet that is progressing my physique. And they're like, right, so you're eating more food, so you can eat this. And it's like, well, I can fit more things in, but it's not a free for all off the back of that. And definitely dealing with these comments, and it comes from a place of not being educated from people, because we don't get taught about nutrition. Arguably, bodybuilders, when you spend the time learning about it, you are one of the people in the world who has the most information about how to manipulate your body the most, which is something that most people would love to know about. Although not if you talk to them about it, and they're not interested, because then they just look at you with dead eyes and they're like, this is really boring. What are you even talking about? What's a macro? So dealing with those comments is, you have to look at the person and you have to go, are they saying it maliciously, or are they just saying it because they don't know? And if they don't know, well, it doesn't matter. I just got to let that stuff go, because that is now something for me to think about, and for me to think, oh, well, why is being called skinny a negative for me? What how do I feel about myself? How do I view myself? And then looking back to where you've started, where you've began, where you've progressed from, what is the phase that you're doing? What is the objective of the phase? How long is the phase? Where are you within that timeline of the phase? And then reviewing that at the end of that timeline. And if you've got a coach, then you've got specifics laid out for you and you can follow those. And I think this is where you can then talk to your partner or those people around you. And this is where building that circle is very valuable. And if not, then having a coach or someone that you can say, oh, like this was said to me and I felt this way. And this is something that I'd like to discuss, because having someone else to be a voice of reason, for want of a better word, is invaluable. Because in this sport, in this kind of bodybuilding realm, being left alone with your own thoughts at the peak off season or in peak week, it's very difficult to make a clear decision objectively based upon your physique. So having people around you that can kind of give you context or just ask you to challenge your own thought process, I think is valuable.
Yeah. And you mentioned about PEDs and you got to that lean point before going down that route. Now, as you know, I am on a solo mission with some of the guests that come on to, I guess, try and bring out a bit more information for the female PED route. But of course, we've actually had conversations of late of the compounds that you've added in this mini cut. And we got to the point where we had a conversation and we were like, oh, this is actually very valuable for when we work with clients or speak to other people about PED use. That conversation, if you're going to go down the assisted route with those around you, because that's super important as well. And I know I've heard you speak to clients and say, are you going to tell your other half you're considering this route? Now, a few things that you've mentioned there about PEDs. So, of course, getting to that lean point naturally and not using anything before that, seeing your genetic potential, your natural potential, whatever we want to call it, was quite important to you, which is, again, a message that I say on the podcast, but also having the education behind what you were going to use when you went down the assisted route before going down that route. Now, we both have a bugbear with how people get led down this route and just get put on, really high doses and whatever else because they don't actually know and have the education behind it. We could probably talk a little bit about your ethos on how you did it and how you feel about, communication with others around if you're going to go down that route.
Yeah, for sure. I think if we touch on the communication with other people first, then having that communication, I think, is so valuable. And just having that open dialogue with people, especially when you explain it. And I think being able to explain it and articulate the decision process means that you also have to have gone through that yourself, besides just going, I'm going to take PEDs, because there should be a reason that you're going to take PEDs or a framework or a groundwork off the back of that. And sometimes they can just be, well, I'm just going to do it because everyone else is doing it, or this is what I got recommended from the guy at the gym, or this is going to give me more muscle. Well, it's going to do a lot of other things on top of that. So you should probably be aware of those things. And I think by doing that and owning that conversation, you get rid of any of this sort of negativity around it from if you've got a pin multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and you're having to do that in secret, maybe you're going to then decide to not pin, but go down the oral route because you can conceal them more, which, as I know, something that people have done before. But then you're going to go down the route of creating more hepatotoxicity, and that's going to be negative upon multiple factors that is going to be notable within your life. So just being transparent and having the conversation, whilst it's going to be for some people very, very difficult and in the short term uncomfortable, in the long term you have to think, well, this isn't going to be something pretty much that you're just going to go on and come off, and you can't just bounce around and do it sometimes and not do other times. You've got to think about when you're going to go traveling, when you're going to go and go away, are you going to take these things with you? These are all going to be things that are going to add potential stress within your life. And maybe, and this is certainly from speaking from experience from clients and people I've spoken to, feel like it's a dirty thing, feel like it's a shameful thing, feel like it's something that they're being dishonest for, even if they're not being dishonest and have never been dishonest about anything else before that. So whilst it would be a difficult thing, and this would be where, if you have got a coach and they are leading you, not leading you, guiding you down this route, having that person there to explain to them if you don't feel confident, but you know that it's a decision that you want to make. And any coach would be quite happy to explain and kind of, or should be quite happy to explain and go through that process with them to explain the fundamentals to that. So I would say that kind of would be my ethos on it. And that's just simply from speaking with people who have concealed it and been found out, and been open and honest, and people who had been concealing it, and then we had the conversation. And there have been blow ups, but then there have also been people being brought wildly together through this process and being able to be way more open and transparent on the things that they're going through at that time as well. In terms of my own thought process, I mentioned earlier having steroids mentioned very early on within my kind of journey into bodybuilding, and the dose that I went on when I started this time versus what I got offered. What I got offered was 3.5 times the amount that I initially went on. And then there were also a lot of orals on top of that. And there have been no oral steroids consumed since 1.5 years of actually being on. And I'm still way under that total amount that that person recommended. And that's 1.5 years on. So after speaking with my coach about it, when we decided to go upon it, it was pull down to the lowest levels of body fat and then have all of the super compensation of regaining any tissue that I'd lost out of dieting very, very hard as a natural, and then have this kind of super compensation and response out the back. And the blow up out of it was quite wild, to be fair. It was a very, very novel stimulus. Who knows what my test was at the very bottom end, because we discussed, and it wasn't worth, it was just going to be more than it was. And what I went on was, above physiological, but more than above what it would have been, because it would have been bottomed out, because I dieted for 6 months and I got pretty peeled. So going on that, and it was just test only, and that was all I took. And then we discussed adding Proviron on top just to add up a little bit more free test, and that was it. And it was a super simple process. One of the things that I noticed for myself was my mental kind of state improved, whether that was owing to obviously the diet and then obviously the test bottoming out. I wouldn't say that my mood was bad when I dieted down and I got very lean, but I noticed that my sense of well-being improved. And this wasn't something that I was searching for. It wasn't even anything that I was kind of aware of within that. I know low mood and things like that can be within when you have tests, but I was excited and hyped for the photo shoot. I was really excited. It was great to have it done as well. And I wouldn't say that I got any lull or lackluster kind of post photo shoot vibes off the back of that, but I just felt better within myself. And that's been something that was very notable. And I am very, very happy that I waited to the point that I did, because I experienced natural bodybuilding for what it was. And realistically, a year of pushing up, maybe I would have got an extra couple of pounds on, maybe a little bit more, but then I would have needed to push up for 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, steadily and incrementally, to make sure that I secured and solidified that tissue. And for me, the exchange of going at a low and slow approach with steroids, with gear, with PEDs, whatever you want to call them, for the exchange that it will give me, is worth it in my eyes. And that was an informed decision, which is what I think everyone should make.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that even from that first initial conversation, and when we tie that into always being that skinny person and thinking about that body image, that when that seed was sown of maybe going down that route one day and that facilitating being bigger would have been a contributing factor to you when you finally did go over to being assisted?
To the dark side, I knew that I would always go on and do steroids, do PEDs. I would never say that it is chasing the size. It is more experience in the process. It is an insatiable thirst for knowing what it feels like and to be able to compare, because you hear so many people that say it's everything, you can eat what you like, you don't have to train, you just blow up. And then you get other people that are like, no, it doesn't make that much difference, it's just like the icing on the cake or the little sprinkles on the top. And it's not until you experience it that it is so much, but also requires you to be on top of everything else as well. And this is my own personal experience. And my coach has kind of said that my response has been fairly favorable, not like absolutely astronomical, but fairly favorable within sort of what he has seen. And within that landscape, it still requires you to train. It still requires you to monitor your food. And this is where I have discussions with clients or have discussions with people who come for consultations, and we discuss where they're at and if they have those things in line first. And also what they're looking to get out of it. Because for me, what I was looking to get out of it when going on was to experience that feeling, to experience what does it actually feel like? What is training like? And my PBs on the gym were like, I'd just put a plate on every single training session. It was like a new pin on a stack. And it was like, I was very mindful of not taking a piss, because I was like, my tendons and my ligaments, they're not going to keep up, but my recovery needs to be on point. I'm taking this phase for everything that I need it to be. But I would just go in and go, wow, that set was hard. And then like 3 days later, I'd be like, oh, new pin. And then straight again, new pin. And it just flew up. And my body composition changed and transformed like monumentally in that kind of initial phase. So it's the way that I know pinpoint that it's not just about getting the biggest is the fact that I'm not interested in doing more and more and more to get more. I'm really interested in steadily progressing, but ensuring that progression is happening and getting the most from the least. We extended my dosage multiple times to keep it the same before we put an escalation in. And I'm more tentative about pushing it up if I still feel like, well, I'm getting way stronger in the gym. I'm able to see physique progression that I could never even imagine when I was natural, still when I'm enhanced, but I'm not running, grams and grams of gear. I'm not even close to a gram. So yeah, it's an interesting one, because it's hard to explain and quantify, and everyone's experience will be different based upon their start point, their body composition, and where they start off, really.
Yeah, we definitely share that. Like, we're both two excitable little puppies. Oh, we get to pin this morning. But I truly believe, very similar to your story, exploring your genetic and natural potential first is definitely a big consideration. There's different people that won't do that. Fine, like Tim came on the pod and he was like, I wanted a pro card in 5 years, I jumped straight on. It's a personal decision, but he had the education behind that, like we always try and get across, and like I do on the podcast. But we then got to that point where we'd done, between us 25 years or whatever, 30 years of training. And then it was like, oh, this is really exciting to see what I can do with my physique. And it's definitely a personal choice. But I think that's a really nice way for us to wrap up today and talk about, just being honest with people around you, being able to make decisions based on what your why is, what you want to do, and essentially digging that little bit deeper if there are things like body image, that this negative self-talk, looking in the mirror, I don't look good, if that's reoccurring all the time through all of your phases, then I'm sure you'll agree it's something that potentially needs some attention, and you need to be able to look inside and rely on other people if you've got those people around you.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where we can look on so many objective based things. You got to do your steps, you got to do this, you got to do that. Where are you doing your mindset work? Where are you doing your deeper look in terms of how this is serving you, how you feel about the process, and having almost one of those reviews, like a check-in with yourself, like actually within yourself, and having that moment and time. And when you do get into the deeper stages of prep, like, you just need to focus on getting it done. But if you're doing daily cardio, if you're doing your daily steps, which in your off season, like that's going to be happening anyway to a certain degree, that's a perfect opportunity for you to check in with yourself, for you to kind of do some of that work where it's not going to take time away from everything else that you're doing if you're super busy. But certainly having, whether it's a logbook, whether it is somewhere that you can write it down, whether it's your notes function on your phone. And this is something that we rediscovered the other day when I wrote essentially a post out and did it via audio. So I press the audio. And this is something that I did when I was away, and I just pressed the audio, and sometimes I would just talk into it. I would just say exactly how I was feeling. Obviously, people that I was walking past just thought I was talking to someone, but I was just putting it down. Yeah, I got a few funny looks. And sometimes I would get really upset when I would do it, and I would look intrinsically, but it served me infinitely in the days to come, weeks to come, and then obviously now kind of the years to come. So just make sure that you're checking in with yourself, but in, not just checking in weekly.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, we have combined our coaching services, and it's something I always say at the end of every pod with all of my guests. So I will do exactly the same for us. And if someone does listen to the podcast, and if it's either them, because I do have males listening as well, or a female listening and it's their other half, and some of this resonates with them, or they want to reach out, I'm sure that you'll agree that your inbox is open for this type of conversation if anyone does resonate.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to have that aspect. I know that we can talk about kind of mental health and everything from when it becomes appropriate, but it's appropriate every single day. So I know that men do struggle with this, and it's something that's coming a little bit more to light, but I think it's still something that you think, nah, is it a thing? And we can shut ourselves away. So I'm happy to chat with anyone. And if you are struggling and you feel like you don't have anyone within your circle, then just reach out, because it's important to know that there's somebody there, and whatever it is that you want to talk about.
Yeah, and whether that's DM or coaching inquiries as well. And Matt's Instagram is, I believe, coached by Matt.300. And if you did resonate with this, if you did enjoy it, if there's anything you took from it, any golden nuggets, get my cereal ready, it's nearly cereal o'clock, then of course tag us on your stories. And I really do hope you've enjoyed this episode, as I'm sure Matt does as well. And of course, how cool to get you on the pod, because the listeners know over the last, well, like we say, just over a year, I've spoke about you probably on nearly every episode. So this is the one who completed my life. Thank you for listening, guys, and thank you, my one.
Thank you, my one.